I'm standing under the glass spine of Red Ridge Logistics downtown Dallas, holding a velvet box with a Cartier I saved 3 months to buy. Ava just texted Senior VP of Marketing. Can you believe it? Yeah, I believed in us. In work, in earning things the hard way. I take the elevator to 42. My hands are steady dock shifts, teach you that. I was here to say, I'm proud of you. Give her the watch and take her to dinner. The hallway is quiet. Laughter leaks through the corner office. Not mine. I open the door, and there it is, champagne sweating on the desk, Victor Kane's hand on her hip, Ava looking at me like I'm the interruption. I don't argue. I don't beg. I raise my phone. One click. 18 years end, with a sound softer than a sigh. You ever had a moment like that, where the floor drops out and you're still standing? Tell me how you'd handle that door. And if you want the truth, not the tantrum stick around, this is how a man does the math. That soft click ending 18 years still rang in my head as I crossed the marble lobby velvet box heavy in my pocket, like a bad secret. The place smelled like lemon polish and money. I nodded at the receptionist, Texas smile perfect hair, and tried to keep the bounce out of my step. Guys my age know that feeling. You work double shifts, you scrape, you do right by your family, and when your wife wins, you feel like you won too. Then some kid in a slim suit drifted by with a paper cup and a smirk. She's upstairs with the CEO. He said like it was a joke I wasn't in on, probably thanking him. I've heard locker room noise my whole life, but this had a mean edge. I set the gift bag on the counter, polite as Sunday, and asked for Ava's floor. The receptionist blinked and swallowed. Corner office, she said, pointing at the elevators like they were a warning label. I hit the button and felt the building hum. Something ugly was waiting. Something ugly was waiting, and the elevator made me ride toward it, one polite floor at a time. I asked, which office, because a man should offer grace before judgment, and the receptionist's answer corner office told me I'd already given enough. In my line of work, you learn to ask for the dock number and keep moving. No speeches, no scenes. 42 lit up, and I remembered anniversaries. We'd kept simple diner burgers, a stroll around Clyde Warren Park, her hand hooked through my arm like we were still broke and happy. The doors opened on glass and quiet. I walked a carpet you could lose a dime in a hallway of closed lips, a city stacked beneath the windows. A laugh bled through the mahogany high, breathless, followed by a man's voice with the lazy confidence of someone who never hears no. I knew the tone. It's the same voice that bumps a guy out of his promotion and calls it fit. I put my palm on the handle, thought about the watch, and decided I'd find out who I was today. And the answer was waiting behind polished wood. Her laugh cut off, and his words slid through like grease. You earned it on your back, sweetheart. There it was. No metaphor, no misunderstanding, just a blunt sentence that makes a man's stomach drop. My old man used to say, people tell you who they are when they think no one's listening. I was listening. I didn't kick the door in. I didn't break anything. I turned the handle like a man opens a tool chest, steady sure, no drama, because the truth doesn't need a drum roll. The room smelled like champagne and ego. Dallas burned behind the glass, hot and bright. For a half second, I waited for the world to correct itself, for the universe to say, just kidding. It didn't. What met me in that office wasn't a mistake or a misunderstanding. It was a choice, hers, his, and it wore a smile like it had already won. Sprawled in the corner office with the city for an audience. Ava was perched on Victor Kane's lap. Her blazer slipped their bodies close in a way that leaves no room for doubt. A sweating bottle sat on the desk like a prop. I've walked into bar fights and dock disputes, but nothing hits like seeing your wife settle into another man like a fit she'd been waiting for. They both turned slow, relaxed as cats. I thought about our first apartment, thin walls, broken AC2 fans, working overtime, how quiet she slept back then, with my arm under her head. That memory didn't save me. It just made the floor drop farther. Kane's eyes measured me, the way a foreman measures a pallet weight usefulness disposal. Ava's gaze pleaded for a narrative, some harmless explanation we could all pretend to believe. I stepped inside, shut the door behind me to keep the truth from running away, and set the velvet box on the table like evidence. Then reached for the one thing a lie can't argue with a camera. The phone felt light, almost friendly. Men my age joke we're terrible at pictures, but a good picture can do what a speech never will. I lifted it, solid hands, clear eyes. No shouting, no bargaining, just a record. One quiet click. I didn't photograph strangers. I photographed a decision. You learn on the docs to tag every pallet note, every dent, because later someone will swear the damage wasn't there. Same deal here. Kane's smile tightened. Ava's face arranged itself into a plea I'd seen on our son's face at 4 years old, only this time it wasn't about a broken lamp. I slid the phone into my pocket. The watch sat between us, a promise from a different hour. Part of me wanted to hand it over anyway, pretend we could rewind. The larger part knew we were past returned store credit and exchanges. Truth has a no refund policy. Truth has a no refund policy, and Kane's voice tried to offer store credit. Delete it, he said low and certain, like men are supposed to fold when money speaks. He called himself the real provider once I'd read it in his posture, the kind of man who thinks power is fatherhood. I've hauled freight in August heat and balanced overtime with Little League. I don't confuse a title with a backbone. Congratulations on the promotion, I told Ava, and meant every hard edge of it. She started to explain, and explanations are just paint on rotten wood. Not today, I said. If I've learned anything since 35, it's this: a man doesn't argue with a storm. He boards the windows and saves the receipts. I picked up the gift bag, then left it. Let it sit there and say what it needed to say. The room waited for me to lose control. I didn't give them that. I reached for the door, carrying the only thing I came for, the truth, and stepped back into the hallway's cold air. I stepped back into the hallway's cold air and let the door latch behind me like a period at the end of a sentence. My legs worked fine. That's a surprise, they keep moving. I've carried a transmission across a shop floor. I can carry this. The elevator chimed, and I watched my reflection in the stainless panel. A man in a tie, his wife picked out, jaw, set eyes calm. Folks think rage is loud. Sometimes it's just a thermostat clicking lower. 42 to lobby is a long fall when your life changes in transit. I thought about calling a buddy, but every man I respect has had a version of this. Maybe not the office, maybe not the CEO, but a moment when trust turns out to have a trap door. The doors opened. I walked through the lobby, straight past the receptionist's worried kindness, into Texas heat that felt honest. My truck waited at the curb like it always does, engine-ready seat molded to my shape. I got in, closed the door, and let the silence count to 10. I let the silence count to 10. Then I did the thing a younger me might have skipped. I backed up the proof. Email. Cloud. A private folder I'd set up for work paperwork, because life teaches you to keep copies. Anger wanted headlines. Discipline wanted timestamps. Men 35 to 60 know the drill. Save the bill of sale, keep the warranty, write down the mileage, because later someone will argue with the facts. I stared at the photo a beat longer than I should have, not to feel pain, but to confirm the frame faces position's content. No wiggle room. I breathe slow and even, the way you do when your kid needs stitches and you're the steady one. I didn't text, didn't post, didn't swing by a bar to tell strangers my story. I sat there in the cab and let the heat fade from my face. The job wasn't to scream, the job was to aim. When the last file synced, I turned the key and pointed the hood toward Plano. But before home, I pulled into a quiet lot, opened the laptop, and typed Victor Kane like I was clocking in. Pride says move on. Prudence says get your facts straight. A clean bio popped up. Stanford mergers charity boards, the usual shine. Then the other results, old complaint settled cases, departures that didn't make sense if you only read the press releases. I bookmarked, cross-checked, and wrote names in a cheap notebook the same way I track bills and oil changes. You get to my age and you understand you don't win a fight by shouting in someone's lobby. You build a record brick by brick until the wall stands on its own. Somewhere between the third link and the fourth cup of coffee, the anger finally got direction. This wasn't just my mess. It was a pattern, and patterns don't stop by themselves. I closed the lid, looked at the skyline, and decided I'd handle this the way I handle freight tag at Move It and make sure it lands where it belongs. To make sure it landed where it belonged, I started with the man at the center. Victor Kane in the search bar looks innocent enough. Resume, polished press, photos in perfect light. The kind of bio that makes investors nod and interns dream. Stanford. Awards. A charity gala grin that says nothing sticks to me. I've seen shiny before. New paint doesn't fix a bent frame. I scrolled past the headlines and read the filler quotes about leadership, a joke about 4 a.m. workouts, the humble brag origin story. It all sounded like the same speech we've all heard at town halls when someone's already decided the plan without you. Still, you start where the road starts. I copied the clean details into a notebook, the dates, the jumps, the sudden growth that made Redridge a powerhouse. Men my age know the difference between pride and puff. Pride stacks boxes until your back burns. Puff buys a bigger mirror. I wasn't jealous of mirrors. I was hunting for the crack that ruins the glass. The crack showed up where it usually does, in the stuff they wish you'd skip. Buried links, old complaints, statements that ended with no admission of wrongdoing, and checks big enough to buy silence at scale. You don't have to be a lawyer to understand that when a story keeps getting settled in the dark, daylight isn't welcome. I didn't click to gawk. I clicked to map. Names, time frames, the way promotions bloomed and then withered. It reminded me of loading a trailer in August. You line up the weight, or the whole thing fishtails. I listed every case with a pen I use for bills, underlined overlaps, circled departments. Not proof yet, but smoke with a smell I recognized. Guys 35 to 60 have lived long enough to know coincidence gets heavy when it keeps repeating. I bookmarked the worst of it and leaned back in the truck seat, staring at downtown like it could answer me. It couldn't, but the pattern was blinking like a hazard light. I needed another set of eyes. Another set of eyes lives at my kitchen table in Plano. Luke had textbooks open and a cereal bowl anchoring his notes like a paperweight. He looks like his mother around the eyes and like my father around the jaw steady stock. I topped off his water and took the chair across from him, the one with the worn groove where my wallet rides. We've had plenty of small talks there, grades, oil changes, whether the Rangers might actually get it done this year, but this wasn't small. "How's that journalism class?" I asked. He shrugged the way 18 does, but the interest was real. He talked about interviews, records, verifying what people say with what paper proves. It sounded like loading doc rules with better grammar. I listened not to humor him, but because men my age eventually admit we don't know everything. He glanced up, clocked the look on my face, and pushed the bowl aside. "What's up?" he said. The right question. I had to decide between pride and the truth. I picked truth because pride only helps when you're lifting. "Luke," I said, "if you were building a story that had to stand, what sources do you trust?" He didn't flinch. Primary first. Court records, financials, people who were there, not rumors. I felt something click into place, the same feeling you get when a ratchet finally bites. He laid it out with the clean lines of a shop diagram. Find. Filings, compare dates, look for patterns in promotions, and exits follow the money when the story gets vague. It wasn't fancy, and that's why it rang true. We've both fixed things with socket sets and patience. Why, he asked. I took a breath. You take before you tell a kid about layoffs, or a diagnosis, or in this case, a different kind of break. "Your mom," I said, "is seeing someone." "The CEO." Silence. Then his mouth tightened, not from shock so much as calculation. He wasn't a child anymore. He was an extra set of hands on a heavy lift. An extra set of hands is how you carry what would crush you alone. He nodded once the way he did when I let go of the bike and he finally found balance. No lecture, no drama. "Then we build it right," he said. "We agreed on rules a lot of men ignore when hurt. No yelling matches, no revenge texts, no midnight drives that end in worse mistakes. We'd write, verify, and keep our own side clean." He pulled his laptop closer already, living in the tabs. "Court sites, public records," he said. "We can check HR trends if we get internal docs." He didn't promise it would be easy. He promised it would be honest. I told him I didn't need a win so much as a straight line we could point to later. The kitchen clock ticked like a metronome. I remembered the first time he asked me what integrity meant, and I'd told him, do the right thing when nobody's clapping. Nobody was clapping now. Good. We could hear ourselves think. Hearing ourselves think led to a plan. We split the load the way you split a weekend project. He'd map names and dates. I'd handle the groundwork. My phone filled with a checklist that looked more like a parts order than a strategy: filings, prior settlements, departures, expense, patterns, contact lists. "Start simple," I told him, "and don't chase ghosts." He smiled at that. He's watched me chase loose ends that fix nothing. We set 2 rules on repeat. Keep receipts, protect the decent people. This wasn't about torching a building. It was about shoring up the beam so it couldn't hurt anyone else. He asked if I was okay. I said I was functional, which is a kind of okay that gets you through. Men 35 to 60 understand that word. Functional means you show up at work, pay the note, mow the lawn, and do the hard stuff later quietly. We both looked at the front door and knew later had arrived. Time to start knocking on facts. Knocking on facts starts with the boring stuff that keeps catastrophes from winning. I made coffee strong enough to stand a spoon, opened a blank notebook, and began the kind of list you don't show social media. Names, dates, departments, supervisors. I printed a calendar and penciled in the spikes promotions that flared and exits that followed like brake lights. We color-coded without getting precious green for support, red for risk, blue for open questions. It felt like building a workbench measure, twice cut, once no shortcuts. Around noon, I drove past Redridge and didn't stop. Not ready for that door again. Instead, I sat in the lot of a strip mall across from the tower and watched shift changes delivery trucks who swiped in with who. No binoculars, no trench coat. Just a man in a pickup drinking coffee, making notes in daylight where anyone could see me. If it couldn't be done straight, I wasn't doing it. By sundown, the list had bones. Now it needed muscle. Muscle in this case looked like patience. The next morning, I parked at Magnolia Coffee with a clear sightline to Redridge's front doors and a refill policy that respects a working man's budget. I timed the Tesla Black, always the same slot, 7:45 to 8 on the dot. I wrote down arrivals like I track mileage on a long haul, steady, honest, no guesswork. Women came in beside him. Sometimes badges flashed, quick small talk that polite lean-in people use when they don't want to be overheard. I didn't stare at faces. I logged rhythms. Guys my age know the difference. When a machine runs wrong, you don't glare at the belt. You listen for the skip. The skip was there. A junior rep one day, a consultant the next, each peeled off at the elevators. I checked the time against my notebook and felt the pattern thicken. This wasn't about jealousy. It was about a map. And maps don't care how you feel. They just tell you where you are. Knowing where you are tells you what matters. I started noting plates, not to shame anyone, but to anchor the timeline. Lunch breaks, smoke breaks, a 10-minute sit in a sedan with tinted windows and a face in both hands. I recognized that look. I've seen it in mirrors and in foremen who just got bad news. I texted Luke the timestamps and the initials on a lanyard I'd caught in a reflection. He pinged back links, LinkedIn, company org charts, breadcrumbs. People leave when they're just trying to move up in the world. Might be Jennifer Walsh, he wrote. New under marketing. I didn't add a story to her face. I added a line to the map. Meanwhile, Kane's schedule stayed clean enough to pass for boring if you didn't stack the days. Stacked it looked like a habit. Habits make cases the way repetition builds muscle. I closed my notebook when the afternoon sun turned the glass harsh. The day had given what it could. Tomorrow would add weight. Tomorrow would add weight, and it did. By lunch, the pattern had shape I could tap with my finger. Kane's window was set. The Tesla, the timing, the mix of employees and consultants. The girl from yesterday, if she was Jennifer, walked in with eyes that had fought a night of thinking. I wrote the name clean and slow, then shut the notebook before I started imagining the rest. Men my age don't need more fiction. We need a file that stands up when someone tries to kick it over. I sent Luke the update and asked him to focus on the public trail. No digging where we didn't belong, no forcing what isn't ours to force. We weren't cops. We were two people making sure truth didn't get run over in the parking lot. As the hour turned, a simple thought settled in. This was bigger than my marriage now. You can repair a home or you can rewire a building. Either way, you kill the short before it burns the block. If you want to kill the short before it burns the block, you start by finding the spark. The next morning, I parked early coffee hot notebook open, watching Redridge wake up. That's when I saw her young, neat blazer hands locked on the wheel of a compact sedan, shoulders shaking. She wasn't scrolling. She was holding herself together. I've seen that posture in men outside hospital rooms and on porches after layoffs. 10 minutes passed. She wiped her eyes, checked her mirror, and walked toward the doors like a soldier going back for a dropped rifle. Badge flashed. Head down. I wrote the plate, the time, and one detail that matters more than most folks realize: how long it took her to breathe steady. I didn't invent a story. I made a line on a map. Back in the truck, I texted Luke a snapshot of the moment with 3 words: probable pressure point. He texted back, on it. That's the thing about patterns. They don't just repeat, they rhyme. I was starting to hear the music. And Luke started naming the notes. 10 minutes later, he pinged me links like a kid dealing baseball cards. Think she's Jennifer Walsh, he wrote. Junior account exec, 8 months in, Seattle before this. Another link showed posts about stress, the vague kind people write when saying more could cost everything. No gossip, just smoke from somewhere real. I told him to screenshot and save, not share. Our project wasn't outrage. It was architecture. He added dates to our table matched her start month, with a rush of late-night meetings on the marketing calendar, and dropped a pin on the week Kane ramped up mentorship. Men our age know that word can mean two different things depending on who's holding the keys. I drove a slow circle around the block, letting the morning fill in. If Jennifer was the short, there were probably others, older wires scorched and wrapped in tape. I needed names that didn't show up at the front doors anymore, names the company wanted everyone to forget. Names the company wanted forgotten usually live in the quiet corners of search results and old group photos no one deleted. I started with the ones Luke flagged from earlier cases. Sandra, Lisa. Both had left quick like a hand yanked a power cord from the wall. I pulled their last Red Ridge press mentions and the first lines from their next jobs. The gaps told a story promising projects, then exit. If you've ever watched a capable guy get shuffled to the parts room, you recognize the tempo. I wrote the names clean and slow in the notebook I use for everything that matters. Mortgage numbers, truck maintenance, now this. I underlined them once. Then I checked LinkedIn trails the way a man checks weather radar. Before a drive, you don't need the whole map, just the direction of the storm. Both women had solid references, and then quiet. Not failure, silence. That's different. Silence means somebody paid for hush or fear did the job for free. Either way, it marks ground worth digging. Ground worth digging makes you test it with a boot before you bring the shovel. I cross-referenced their old performance blurbs with anything: public conference panels, awards, even birthday posts from coworkers. Up until the end, everything read strong. Then the tone shifted to wishing you the best and excited for new opportunities, the kind of phrases folks use when nobody wants to say what happened. I've seen it on job sites. A guy whose aces disappears Friday and Monday. The foreman shrugs like gravity handled it. I penciled in timelines, glowing review, special project. Sudden exit. Next to that, I wrote a note. Only I needed to understand bloom, then wither. It's not science, but if you've ever tried to keep a lawn alive through a Texas August, you know what sudden withering looks like. Something starved the roots. I leaned back, squeezed the bridge of my nose, and felt the anger try to sprint ahead of the facts. I let it run into a wall. We were building, not burning. Building, not burning meant finding someone inside who could put steel under our frame. That's when the name Sarah Patel kept showing up, HR manager on memos, quiet, in public, neutral, in tone. Neutral can be camouflage or courage. I sent a careful message, no drama, no threats, just concern about workplace culture and a request for 5 minutes off-site. She replied with a time and a cafe 2 neighborhoods away. I told Luke I'd go alone. Men my age don't drag their sons into rooms where the air could shift. The cafe was all reclaimed wood and plants hanging like they owned the place. Sarah arrived early, back straight, eyes tired in a way coffee can't fix. She kept her purse close and her voice even. You said culture, she began, and that's usually code. What do you really want? I put my palms on the table. Empty. The truth, I said, straight if you can manage it. She didn't blink. I can, she said, but it comes with splinters. Truth with splinters isn't a warning. It's a promise that someone's hands are already bleeding. Sarah spoke in careful lines the way people do when they've measured every word against a policy binder. There are patterns, she said. Unusual fast tracks. Projects that create proximity. She didn't say Kane's name at first, like a person avoiding a rattlesnake by pretending the rattle is wind. I asked simple questions and let silence do its job. Silence is a tool you learn after 40. It drags more honesty out than any hard shove. Finally, she said, when women resist, their reviews change. Opportunities shift. Exits follow. She still wasn't speculating. She was stacking facts like cinder blocks. I nodded, and the look on her face said she'd been waiting for someone to nod like that. Why meet me? I asked. Sarah glanced around the cafe and chose a straight answer. Because if no one connects the dots out loud, the dots become a maze you never leave. She folded her hands. Do you have anything concrete? Anything concrete. I'd been waiting for those words since the door clicked shut behind me at Redridge. I slid my phone across, opened to the photo I hadn't shown another soul. No drama, just evidence. She studied it like an adjuster looks at a bent fender angle force liability. Her throat worked once. When she asked, "Business hours," I said, "In his office." She breathed out slow. Then that's policy. Multiple policies. The relief in her face wasn't joy. It was the kind of relief you feel when a jack finally finds the frame and the car lifts a fraction off your chest. "This corroborates what we've suspected," she said, voice low. "Not rumor. Pattern." I didn't smile. Concrete doesn't care how you feel. It holds or it doesn't. She tapped the screen once like she was blessing it, then met my eyes. "If I step forward, it has to be with protection. Documentation first. Always documentation." I nodded. We were speaking the same language now. Receipts, not rage. Receipts, not rage is how you keep your footing when the floor moves. Sarah leaned in. "I keep duplicates," she said. "Promotion packets, performance reviews, termination memos. Not to harm anyone, just insurance. Men my age understand keeping a second key in the junk drawer." "Off-site," I asked. She gave the smallest nod. "Encrypted copies, too." That was her line. She wasn't handing me files. She was telling me they existed and could be verified. Fair. I told her we weren't out to light the whole place on fire, just stop a dangerous circuit. "Then you'll need press," she said. "Not gossip pages, someone who sticks when the pushback comes." She had a name ready, Amy Chen at the Dallas Business Journal. She's tried to run with stories like this. Companies lawyer up, but if there's documentation and multiple voices... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. The path was starting to show itself like tire tracks in dust. Now we needed more than one set of tracks. More than one set of tracks means the road is real, not just a mark in the sand. I asked Sarah about former employees, Sandra Lisa names we'd found in the old smoke. Her eyes said she knew the files. Her mouth said nothing that could hurt them. "They moved on," she offered. Which wasn't untrue, just incomplete. I told her Luke could help locate them, and we'd ask straight, no pressure, no promises. If they talk, Sarah said they'll need to see others standing with them. That's the math men learn. Late courage multiplies, fear divides. I thought of the young woman in the sedan, the way her hand shook before she set her shoulders and walked inside. "There's a current case," Sarah added finally. "A name I won't say yet, but the signs are the same." I didn't push. I just wrote a blank line in my notebook and waited. Some lines fill themselves when the time is right. She checked her watch. "If we do this, we do it clean. No ambushes." "Clean," I said, "or not at all." That same night, while Dallas glowed like it always does for other people, Ava stood alone in the restroom outside the executive floor. She held her new badge up to the mirror like a prize she couldn't lift. In her drafts, a text to her mother blinked. "I made it." "It doesn't feel like I thought." She deleted it. In the glass, you could see two versions fighting the girl who outworked everyone at a folding table in grad school, and the woman who kept telling herself success was a door you walked through, no matter who was holding it open. She fixed her lipstick like armor, pocketed the doubt, and went back to the room where the music was louder than her pulse. Clean or not at all became the rule I carried back to my truck and into the next morning. I returned to Magnolia Coffee with the sun just clearing the skyline, set my cup down where the reflection off Redridge's doors gave me a clear angle and went quiet. At 7:52, the black Tesla slid into place like a habit. Kane stepped out with that loose walk of men who assume the world will make room. 2 minutes later, a brunette in a neat blazer crossed the plaza, eyes on the ground, posture tight. She paused at the door, inhaled like she was about to jump in a cold lake, and followed him through. I didn't chase a story in my head. I checked the time, wrote the entrance, and underlined the moment. Then I texted Luke one word, confirm. The 3 dots appeared, then a link. "Jennifer Walsh," he wrote. "Junior AE, reports up to Ava." The line I'd left blank yesterday now had a name. The pattern wasn't just history anymore. It was happening in real time, and we were finally lined up to stop it. If we were finally lined up to stop it, the next step was simple: start stacking bricks. I called it what it was, casework. No speeches, just receipts. Luke took the timelines. I took the paper trail. Sarah handled what lived behind passwords. We listed what counts in the real-world: performance reviews, promotion packets, travel, and hotel charges, client dinners that didn't match any client. I've balanced ledgers for a shop floor. Numbers tell on you when you stop listening. We built a shared sheet that felt like framing a house. Studs straight, nails flush, measure twice. When a date didn't match a meeting, we marked it. When a credit card charge lined up with a night, the mentorship ran late, we circled it. None of this was sexy. It was steady. And steady is how bridges hold. I kept telling myself the same thing I tell Luke when we fix the mower: don't strip the bolt. Go slow, add pressure, and if it squeaks, that's the sound of the truth coming loose. The truth coming loose meant finding voices, not just numbers. Luke fired off polite notes to Sandra and Lisa, the names we dug up in the quiet parts of the internet. He didn't chase. He invited. We're verifying a pattern, he wrote, and we'll keep your word intact. Men learn at my age that tone is a tool. He used it well. At first, Sandra didn't reply. A day passed. Then two. Luke checked his inbox like a man waiting on test results. Finally, Lisa wrote back, cautious but clear. On the record, if documents back it up. It wasn't a floodgate, but it was a crack. A day later, Sandra's name finally popped up. Just 6 words. I'm ready to talk. Those phrases didn't feel like gossip. They felt like a door unlocking. I thought about all the times on the dock when 2 guys finally admitted a machine was dangerous and how fast real work starts once the denial dies. Luke set times for calls and asked them for documents. They legally owned emails, calendars, old review notes. He didn't promise outcomes. He promised accuracy. And in this kind of storm, accuracy is a lifeline. With 2 past voices steady, we turned back to the present tense. The present tense had a name: Jennifer, the woman from the sedan. Luke's research fit the face. I asked Sarah what she knew. Her eyes did the math before her mouth moved. She's new. Good. Getting attention. We both knew that word cuts 2 ways. I messaged Jennifer straight. No flourishes, told her I was a husband, a father, and I wasn't asking her to risk more than she had to. She wrote back hours later, hedging every sentence the way people do when their rent depends on their next step. I can't lose this job, she said. That's not fear talking. That's life. Student loans, car note, groceries. I've stood in those aisles figuring out what goes back on the shelf. I told her we weren't asking for heroics, just honesty, and that we wouldn't publish a word without verification. Silence. Then, if I help, what protects me? That was the right question. Not do you believe me, but can I survive the truth? I told her Sarah had answers, real ones with teeth. Real answers with teeth come from knowing the rules better than the people who break them. We met in a corner booth, me, Jennifer, and Sarah, who brought a calm you can't fake. Sarah laid it out in plain English. There's a straight path, like calling an inspector into a factory. They show up with a clipboard and questions. If behavior crosses the line, you don't have to hold it up alone. No fancy terms, just what it means. You don't have to take a hit and smile. Jennifer listened like a tightrope walker, learning where the net starts and ends. She wasn't naive. She wanted terms, not slogans. If I report, she asked, does it become a witch hunt? Sarah shook her head. Evidence first. Always. Patterns matter, but proof carries the load. I watched Jennifer's shoulders shift 1 notch lower, like a cable easing off a winch. She asked how long it would take. I didn't lie. Long enough that we'll need your patience, I said. Short enough to matter. Her eyes steadied. So, what does helping look like? What does helping look like is the hinge every real plan swings on. I told Jennifer we weren't asking for stories whispered over coffee. We needed verifiable moments, times, places, messages. If he crosses a line, I said, you write down the time within 5 minutes, and you tell one of us the same day. No memory holes. She nodded. If he's subtle, I smiled without humor. Subtle leaves tracks too. Sarah added the part only she could say. If he proposes mentorship outside policy or offers personal perks for work favors, that's not a mentorship. And company rules cover that. Jennifer looked at the table, then back at me. If he says it out loud, she whispered, can I record? Texas allows one-party consent. I knew that much. Yes, I said, if you're part of the conversation, you can. Her jaw set the way a person sets a jack under a sagging axle. Then that's my condition, she said. I'll help, but I want the tape. We didn't cheer. We just agreed. The next move needed a reporter who didn't scare easy. A reporter who doesn't scare easy had a name, Amy Chen, Dallas Business Journal. Sarah had tested her before. Solid work, no appetite for rumor, a spine under the polite blazer. We booked a conference room at Sarah's attorney's office so nobody could accuse us of playing in shadows. Amy walked in with a notebook and the kind of focus you see in good mechanics. They listen for the rattle before they pick up a wrench. I told the story once clean, then shut up. Sarah placed sample documents in a neat stack. Timelines, reviews, expense slips, the policy pages that matter when paychecks are on the line. Luke dialed in with Sandra and Lisa ready to talk. Amy didn't chase drama, she chased confirmation. Who else can verify this? What's the source on that charge? Can I see both the praise and the criticism on the performance file? It felt less like an interview and more like an audit, which is exactly what we needed. When she finally looked up, there was weight in her eyes. Weight in her eyes wasn't excitement. It was responsibility landing. You have enough for me to write, Amy said, and enough for agencies to look twice. The financial misuse alone could trigger questions. She wasn't promising indictments or headlines that fix lives. She was promising process, the grown-up kind. Then came the catch, delivered like a torque spec you can't ignore. I have to give Redridge a chance to respond, she said. 24 to 48 hours, it's ethics, and it's the law of the road in our business. I felt that old surge, the part of a man that wants to skip steps when the finish line is in sight. But skipping steps is how wheels pass you on the highway. Understood, I said. Luke asked the only follow-up that mattered. What happens in that window? Amy closed her notebook. They push back, deny, maybe threaten, or they panic and make mistakes. I knew which outcome power prefers and which one pride often chooses. Pride is loud, panic is messy. Both leave fingerprints. That night, the smooth road bucked. Amy's editor called legal, flagged it. We need one more on-record voice or a contemporaneous record. Otherwise, we pause. 10 minutes later, Lisa panicked and pulled back. I can't do this. I have a kid. I didn't blame her. Fear pays on time. Then Redridge's outside counsel sent Amy a letter dressed like a gentleman and shaped like a threat. Big words about defamation and tortious interference, the kind meant to make normal people fold. We didn't fold. We tightened. Sarah locked duplicates in a second place. Luke rebuilt the timeline like a tech checking torque specs line by line, no play. Jennifer texted, he just set a one-on-one for tomorrow. Glass room, midday, boundaries, public. If he stays clean, we stay cleaner, I wrote. And then her second text landed like a tool you prayed you wouldn't need. If he gets cute, I'm hitting record. Both leave fingerprints, and that window could give us more than we brought to the table. We set roles like a crew before a heavy lift. Amy would draft. Sarah would lock down copies where they couldn't vanish. Luke would keep mapping names to dates, building a timeline so clear it could survive a storm. My job: hold the line, don't take the bait. Don't tip our hand, and for once in my life, let the clock help me. Waiting is a skill men earn the hard way fishing child rearing, waiting for a late shift to end. I told Jennifer what was coming and reminded her of the rules. If he leans in, you lean on the truth. If he stays clean, we stay cleaner. She asked if I was scared. Yes, I said, because fear keeps you honest. But fear isn't the driver. Discipline is. That's not a slogan. That's how you get through Texas August without wrecking your truck. We left the meeting with fewer words than we brought. Quiet meant we were finally doing it right. Doing it right felt like tightening lug nuts in the correct order cross pattern. Even pressure, no rush. Amy called her editor. The green light blinked. She started the verification cycle calls to sources' requests for comment, the slow, necessary grind that turned stories into reports. Sarah notified her lawyer and logged every move like it might be Exhibit A one day. Luke built a clean chart, the kind of thing you could hang in a courtroom or put on a shop wall and have men nod, because the lines make sense. I drove past Redridge without looking up, hands at 10 and 2, heart steady. When Amy finally sent her formal questions to the company, the clock started. We could almost hear the gears turn in that corner office, the legal emails, the damage control meeting, the calls to people who once owed favors. I told myself a hard truth. I wish I'd learned younger. Sometimes the strongest move a man makes is to stop moving. Let the other side sweat. Let the facts breathe. Let the facts breathe and watch what pride does with oxygen. The response window opened, and you could feel Redridge shift into crisis stance, lights on late cars stacking in reserved spots, security suddenly visible at the doors. Jennifer texted me mid-afternoon. He wants a meeting, one-on-one. No exclamation points. Just the kind of line that tightens your grip on the wheel. I told her to keep her boundary public place or office with glass. No closed suites, keep it professional. If he crosses the line, I said you already know the drill. She replied with a single word that carried more courage than a speech copy. The next day, Kane tried subtle like a man who thinks whispers don't echo. Mentorship has perks. Loyalty gets noticed. We can make your path easier. No slur, no shout, just pressure dressed like help. Jennifer let the silence hang, then asked, "So that means dinners, trips, or me?" He smiled the way men do when they think the room is theirs. "You're smart. Don't make me spell it. Click. One-party consent. Lawful. Time-stamped. Subtle still leaves tracks." When I heard the clip, my hands went steady the way they do before a heavy lift. Amy's editor didn't cheer. He nodded. "That's the contemporaneous record. Proceed." As dusk brushed the Dallas skyline, Amy confirmed the countdown publication ready after their clock runs. I stood in my driveway in Plano, the heat finally bleeding out of the day, and felt that clean edge you get before a race starts. 24 to 48 hours. For some men, that's an eternity. For a man who's done the prep, it's just long enough for the other guy to make the kind of mistake you can measure. A mistake you can measure usually shows up when pride thinks the clock is a friend. We aimed our release for Gala Week at the Dallas Museum of Art, not for drama, for leverage. Donors, board members, clients in the same room means reputation gets a front row seat. Amy lined up the timing like a pit crew lining lug nuts, and we double-checked everything: quotes, dates, documents, what we'd say on record, and what we'd hold back for investigators. I drove the route between Plano and the museum just to feel the turns the way I do before a long haul. Men my age know preparation isn't fussy. It's mercy for your future self. Luke printed a clean summary for me, one-page plain English, so if microphones found me, I wouldn't ramble. Sarah kept her files braided tight. Jennifer focused on her lane. We weren't heroes. We were a crew with a job. As the week narrowed to a point, Dallas heat got meaner traffic thicker, and the air felt like it does 5 minutes before a summer storm. 5 minutes before a summer storm is when you check the latch on the gate and put the tools away. Early evening, my phone buzzed. "Amy, I'm publishing tonight." They're sniffing around injunctions. That word isn't scary. Delay is. Delay eats proof. "Do it," I texted back. I parked 2 blocks from Red Ridge, close enough to see the corner office lit like a stage, far enough to think. Inside, you could make out silhouettes, moving crisis choreography. My screen lit again. "Ava, stop this. You're destroying everything." Another, "I made a mistake, but I love you. We can fix it." Then, "Answer me." I read each one the way you read a label on a product you can't afford. Once upon a time, I would have answered. The man in me who fixes things wanted to. The man who'd learned the price of fixing the wrong thing didn't. I turned the phone over face down on the dash and watched the glass tower like it might confess. It didn't. Towers don't talk. They just magnify whatever's inside. Whatever was inside that tower was about to find a louder room. Amy sent the final text, "Locked. 10 minutes." That's not a countdown you meet with speeches. That's when you breathe, tighten your grip, and let the work speak. I thought about men I know, guys who've taken bad news on tailgates and in break rooms and kept their voice even, because sometimes the only thing you can control is how you carry it. Downtown hummed. A siren threaded the heat. Somewhere a street saxophone tried "America the Beautiful" and missed a note. I watched the minute hand crawl and told myself the same thing I tell Luke before big tests you prepared in the daylight. Trust your daylight. At 11:00 p.m., my phone buzzed face down so hard it scooted. I flipped it over. Headline, "Clean and Cold, Red Ridge CEO accused of systematic misconduct, company funds implicated." First photo was the one I took Ava Kane, champagne, sweating. No blur, no mercy, just context. My chest didn't swell. It settled. Truth had weight now. It could stand without me. It could stand without me, which is the only way truth survives a push. The piece was tight, no gossip, just receipts. Quotes from Sandra and Lisa. A line about sources within HR. The expenses laid out like fence posts in the ground. My name wasn't in it. It didn't need to be. I scrolled once, then stopped. You don't stare at a welding arc. You trust the bead and move on. Across the street, Red Ridge stayed bright, the kind of light that makes everyone look tired. My phone started doing its own crisis choreography, calls, texts, notifications stacked like pallets. I didn't answer. I watched the lobby instead. Executives in suits that suddenly looked too tight, security posted like they'd always been there. Assistants hustling with the walk of people told to fix the ocean. Somewhere in that building, Kane read the thing he couldn't outlift. And somewhere else, Ava read a mirror she didn't ask for. I didn't cheer. I turned the key and drove home on empty streets that felt finally honest. Empty streets can be kind. They let a man hear the engine and his own breathing. I pulled into the driveway in Plano and sat a minute headlights on the garage door, like stage lights on a blank curtain. Luke stepped out barefoot, phone in hand, eyes wide, but calm. "It's live," he said like I hadn't noticed, and handed me a bottle of water like we'd just wrestled a fridge up the back steps. Inside, we didn't high-five. We opened laptops at the kitchen table where most of our big calls happen: finances, school choices, now this. Amy's story climbed the site, then got picked up the way a spark finds dry grass. Local TV teased segments. Talk radio warmed up its takes. I forwarded nothing. We were done pushing. We were in measure mode now. Luke refreshed a stock app out of habit. "Pre-market's gonna be rough," he said. I nodded, remembering mornings when a busted transmission meant a month of juggling bills. Companies don't feel like that, but they feel something when confidence walks out. When confidence walks out, markets measure it fast. By sunrise, Redridge slid like a truck, with no brakes on black ice down hard before coffee. I don't root for losses. I root for lessons that stick. News vans staked out sidewalks. You could hear generators before you saw the logos. Reporters read their opens to cameras with that careful tone that says, "We don't want to get sued." My phone kept buzzing, unknown numbers lawyers offering to represent a couple buddies with "you good" texts, and one message from a guy I used to work with: "Saw the article. Proud of you for standing up." That one I answered, doing it clean. Around 9, Sarah called. "Administrative leave," she said, voice flat with relief. "Kane's out pending investigation." A beat later, Ava too. I leaned on the counter and stared at the sink like it owed me advice. Luke poured coffee and slid a mug my way. We didn't clink. We just drank two men awake inside a day we knew would not be quiet. A day that wouldn't be quiet doesn't mean you have to be loud. I showered, shaved, wore the kind of shirt that says I'm available for questions, but not chaos, and drove toward downtown at a normal speed. Media had multiplied outside Redridge Tripod's cables, a few folks holding phones high like nets. I parked a block away and watched through the everyday traffic of people who still had to make deliveries and clock in. The glass doors opened and closed like Gill's lawyers and PR out. A woman I didn't know stood by a planter, organizing her breathing like it was a new skill. "You okay?" I asked from a respectful distance. She nodded without meaning it. "I work 2 floors down. We knew things. Didn't know this." I told her she didn't have to know everything to have been hurt by something. She half smiled and went inside. That's the thing about systems, they splash. You can stand on the dock and still end up wet. I checked my watch. The day's second shoe was about to drop. The second shoe was the state and the feds stepping into the doorway. Headlines stacked Texas outlets ran with it. National feeds sniffed the air. The Dallas Business Journal posted a follow-up with quotes from outside counsel. One line hit with the clean thunk of a hammer. "They're not knocking politely anymore. They want the keys and the ledger. Whoever's holding the keys, whoever's holding the books now has to step into the light." Inquiry isn't a conviction. It's a locked door with someone on the other side asking for keys. Amy texted a simple "be ready." I knew what that meant. On-record questions, off-record background, and the discipline to say I don't know when I didn't. Luke texted from campus mad. I'd told him not to skip class and then sent me a photo of the front page anyway. Sarah messaged employees coming forward. 3 so far. Not curiosity, courage. I thought of Jennifer and the way her voice had steadied when she said copy. We didn't build the storm. We built a shelter for the people who'd been standing in it alone. That was the point from the start. The point from the start was justice, not theater, and justice has a cold face when it finally shows up. By late morning, Redridge's statement hit my screen, predictable words about values and process and taking allegations seriously. It read like something you print on a hallway poster. Then came the board's move emergency session at noon. I could picture the room because they all look the same: polished table-bottled water, a window with a view that's supposed to inspire perspective. Boardrooms can be brave or they can be careful. Today they'd have to pick. I parked across from the Dallas Museum of Art, the gala banner still promising celebration like it hadn't checked the weather. It struck me how life doesn't reschedule for your mess deliveries still arrive, games still play, sprinklers still kick on at 6. My phone buzzed again. Not Ava this time. Jennifer. He asked to meet at 2. She attached a location inside the building, glass walls, people around. It wasn't Victory. It was a hinge. Hinges swing heavy doors. Hinges swing heavy doors, and by early afternoon, you could feel one moving. Kane on leave. Ava suspended. Texas media in full tilt. The board behind closed glass. And in the middle of all that, Jennifer walking back into an office with a recorder in her purse and a spine where panic used to live. I told her the only 3 words that matter when you're doing a hard thing the right way. You're not alone. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. I stood in the Plano driveway an hour later, sun-high mower humming 2 houses over normal life, refusing to pause and realize the strangest part of justice is how ordinary the world looks while it happens. No trumpets, just paperwork and people telling the truth 1 sentence at a time. That same night, Ava sat alone in her office. The city threw light on the glass like it wanted in. An apology draft blinked on her screen. "I'm sorry, I lost the plot. I hurt you." Her fingers hovered. She pictured the boardroom, the paycheck, the title on the door that finally said she mattered to people who never learned her middle name. The cursor beat like a metronome for a song she didn't want to play. She selected the paragraph and watched the words turn blue before she erased them. New draft tight legal defensive, the kind you send when you're fighting for a version of yourself you're not sure you even respect. She saved it. She didn't send it. She turned the monitor off and let the dark answer back. That question, who falls and who stands, followed me into the gala like a shadow. I pulled the old wedding suit from the closet and hoped it still had a straight line in it. Dallas Museum of Art glowed like a promise people make when they want to forget daylight. I walked in alone past a bar serving relief by the glass, past smiles that wouldn't hold into a room, buzzing with the hum folks use when they're pretending the barn isn't smoking. Eyes found me, the way eyes find the guy who called the fire department. Some nodded, some flinched. Truth makes poor cocktail talk. I stood along the back wall where a working man belongs, hands in pockets, spine up, exit in view. On the stage, a string quartet tried to comfort money. It didn't take. A board member cleared his throat, touched the mic, and the room quieted like church. He thanked donors, swallowed hard, and said the thing everyone came to hear. Effective immediately, he read, "Victor Kane has resigned." Victor Kane has resigned, and the applause sounded like rain on a metal roof, loud, thin, not reaching the ground. Nobody threw hats. People glanced at their phones to see if anyone else believed it yet. I watched faces. Relief here, calculation there. A couple I'd seen at company picnics, holding hands like a storm was passing. The chairman talked policies and audits, promised change, promised courage, promised words that look good in brochures. I've been in enough meetings to know the difference between a vow and a vent. Still, it mattered. A man who thought he couldn't be moved had moved. I didn't feel taller. I felt steadier. The quartet picked up a hopeful piece and the room tried to breathe. That's when the doors at the back swung hard, catching light like a signal mirror. Heads turned, heels clicked, and there she was. Ava, hair undone, eyes bright with something stronger than courage. A dress that looked picked in a hurry, the tilt of a person who'd practiced a speech alone and didn't like the ending. She didn't like the ending, so she tried to write a new one on a borrowed stage. Ava cut down the aisle, shoulders, set jaw, locked that familiar focus that once crushed deadlines, now crushing distance. Security moved, then thought better of it. No one wants to manhandle a scandal with a last name. People know. She reached the mic, took it like a dare, and didn't wait for permission. You could hear a glass touch down, smaller than a word, heavier than one. In a room full of polished statements, her words landed like a wrench on concrete. I felt men in the crowd straighten the way we do when something honest hits bone. She kept going about ambition, shortcuts, the story she told herself about making it, about believing he'd leave his wife like this was a movie, and she was the exception. A laugh, small and mean, died in someone's throat. She wasn't asking for sympathy. She was asking for the weight to fall where it belonged, on her side of the scale too. On her side of the scale too meant turning toward me. And she did, eyes clearing the way. A sky clears after hail still dangerous, suddenly blue. You wanted revenge. Ava said, not spitting, just laying a board across two sawhorses. You got it. I hope it was worth it. It wasn't a knife. It was a ledger. I didn't answer. Not there. Not with donors and cameras within reach. Men my age learn that some sentences only make sense in kitchens and truck cabs. The room held its breath. The chairman whispered with an aide. The quartet set their bows down like they were holding their own hands. For a heartbeat, I remembered our first-place window unit, rattling her feet folded under her, a pizza on a cardboard circle, and a plan to be good people. We'd gotten fancy somewhere and lost the map. Security finally stepped forward, gentle, practiced. Ava let the mic go, shoulders slumping, as if the cost had finally posted to the account. She walked out the way she'd come, leaving the air ringing. Leaving the air ringing doesn't make a room wise, but it makes it honest. The chairman slid back to the mic, declared the program concluded, and the quartet played something soft for a crowd that wanted escape routes. People filed past me with a mix of pity and respect, and that look you give a guy whose truck pulled you out of a ditch, grateful, awkward, ready to move on. I walked the gallery once slow reading plaques. I won't remember letting my pulse come down. Outside, Dallas felt cooler than it had all week. News vans idled like they were tired too. I drove home the long way past the Red Ridge Tower where lights still burned, past Magnolia Coffee, past the places where plans had been made and unmade. The house in Plano was quiet Luke's porch light, an ordinary mercy. He opened the door before I knocked, read my face, and didn't ask for a play-by-play. "You good?" he said. "Functional," I answered, and we both knew what that means. It means you get up tomorrow and keep going. Keep going is hard when a room full of silence follows you home. The next morning, the phone vibrated itself across the counter. Reporters, lawyers, cousins who never call. I let most of it roll to voicemail. A man can drown in congratulations as easy as in grief. Ava's words kept replaying not as an accusation, but as a mere revenge worth it. I'd call what I did something colder, documentation consequence, but the question still bites. Men our age have asked it after fights and firings and funerals. Did I do the right hard thing, or just the hard thing that felt right? I made coffee, sat at the table where homework and budgets live. Luke slid a plate of eggs my way and took one for himself. We didn't toast. We ate. In the empty space where marriage used to sit, I felt two truths rise together. I missed who we were, and I wouldn't trade what we'd done. You can hold both without breaking if you don't clench. If you don't clench, you can hear the world again. It sounded ordinary. A garbage truck, a neighbor's leaf blower, a jogger's shoes on asphalt. Ordinary is underrated. The board moved fast because boards like survival. Red Ridge announced interim leadership and policy reviews, the usual words that mean someone found a broom. I'm not cynical about brooms. Clean is better than dirty. The media cycle loud yesterday started its slow roll into other fires. I spent the afternoon fixing the back gate that had been sticking since spring. There's a peace in making a latch catch that no headline can give you. Luke came out with 2 waters, and we worked in easy silence, father and son, wood and steel. When we finished, the gate swung and clicked with a sound that felt like an answer. Not everything broken stays broken. Not everything fixed makes noise. That night, I slept straight through for the first time in weeks. No dreams, no replay. Just the kind of rest a man earns when he's out of excuses. Out of excuses is a clean place to stand. And a few weeks later, the mail brought proof that the world had kept moving while I learned how. A plain envelope, no return address, the kind you'd miss in a pile of catalogs. Inside, a clipped article about Red Ridge's new prevention policies training, reporting lines, guardrails that should have been there before men like me had to become carpenters. Paperclipped to it was a note from someone who didn't sign a name. Thank you for acting when the rest of us were tired of being brave in private. I read it twice and didn't try to guess. Then there was the small, soft weight, wrapped in tissue. I knew it before I unfolded the paper. The Cartier. The watch that was supposed to mark a promotion and ended up marking a fault line. It had found its way back like a lost dog that remembers the porch. I held it, felt the heft, and set it on the counter between us, me and the man I was becoming. The man I was becoming doesn't live in souvenirs. I picked up the watch, felt the old story tug good. Husband, good gift, good timing, and let it go. I walked to the kitchen, trash, lifted the lid, and dropped the whole bundle like it was hazardous material. No ceremony. Some endings don't need music. Luke looked up from his homework. "Everything okay?" he asked. Everything's as it should be, I said and meant it more than I wanted to say out loud. We talked apartments after that, closer to downtown, smaller place, new start. He asked if I was sad. I told him sadness and relief aren't enemies. They sit on the same bench and take turns reminding you you're alive. Before bed, I stood on the back step and listened to the neighborhood wind down dogs' TVs, a teenager's laughter bleeding over the fence. Somewhere, people were still telling themselves easy stories. In my house, I was done with easy. Tomorrow I pack. Tonight I rest. I sit in the Plano kitchen with Luke, the late son, laying a clean line across the table where we did budgets and homework and hard truths. He says, "You didn't just get even, you stopped a predator. That lands where the old hurt used to live. Payoff isn't fireworks. It's a door that finally closes without sticking. The click that ended 18 years became the click that opened a safer place for people I'll never meet. The Cartier's gone, the photo stands, and the company is changing because the record wouldn't bend. Justice has a price. I paid mine. Now I'm scrolling apartments in Dallas, smaller, closer, honest." Luke grins, says the commute will be easier. We laugh, the kind you only earn after doing something the slow right way. If you've ever had to choose between rage and discipline, you know this feeling. If this story hit a nerve, tell me how you'd have handled that door. Drop a comment. Share it with a friend who needs the nudge and subscribe. There's more to build, and I'd like you in the crew.